This is a quick demonstration of the Zend PHP Cloud.com technologies, Zend Developer Cloud, the PHP Fabric, and the integration with Zend Studio. What you can see here is the Zend Developer Cloud on phpcloud.com. What I have is one container. A container is basically a instance of the Zend Application Fabric. It's running Zend server. It has a database associated with it. I can create a second container simply by creating create container. I give it a container password. This is the password it's going to use for the Zend server GUI and for the MySQL database underneath. And it's going to create a container for me. So this container, as I said, is creating a copy of Zend server running within this phpcloud.com environment. It's creating my own little instance of the database that I can store my data in, and it's going to deploy a default application into that container. So I've got ahead, and within just a few seconds I've created a copy of the PHP Application Fabric running in Zend Developer Cloud. Now if I wanted to, I could go look at this application, and here's the default application that it displays. I can also add other applications to this container. So if I wanted to, I could come in and create a new application. So I could create, for example, an empty PHP application and an empty Zend Framework application. Let's do that. So if I create an empty Zend Framework application, I'll call it ZFW. I'll deploy that. And now it's going to create an empty Zend Framework application. Once that application is created, get information about that application and be able to upload code to it using Git, or as another alternative to that, I have other ways of deploying code using SFTP or Zend Server. Going back to the cloud one more time and back into this container one more time, we can even actually deploy complete applications in here. So if I say here's a new application and I want to deploy Drupal, maybe I'm going to develop a Drupal module to plug in, I can deploy Drupal. And within a fairly short period of time, I'll have a Drupal application running in this container as well. So it's initializing the Drupal, setting up the database. If I click on it, there. So I've been adding some applications to this container. Now that I have my containers, I can come back out here again, look at my containers. One of the things I can do is take a snapshot of one of these containers. So there's two reasons to take a snapshot. One reason to take a snapshot is maybe you just want to take a backup of this container before you start working on it. Another reason is that once you have a snapshot, you can actually pass those snapshots off to your friends. So if you want to, you can come in here and say sharing. You can make it a shared snapshot, and then I can send somebody this URL that's here, and they can use it to create a copy of this container. Now it's not just a copy of the container, it's a copy of the code that's in the container, it's a copy of all the configuration in the container, and it's a copy of the database content. So when they recreate it, it's like recreating another copy of exactly what I was working on. So if somebody's going to help me or collaborate or try to figure out what was going on in my system, they have an exact copy. And I think that's a pretty nice kind of thing to do. So now that we've done a couple things here, created a couple containers, what I want to show you is how I can actually use Studio in conjunction with this and create an environment where I can edit something in Studio and have it work directly with phpcloud.com. So I'm going to pop over to Zend Studio. This is the new Zend Studio 9, just released in beta today. One of the things that's new about Zend Studio 9 is we have a new configuration wizard here that'll help you configure what you actually use in Studio. So for example, I use Git and GitHub, therefore there's no reason for me to turn on CVS support or SVN support. If I needed to use both, I could simply turn that on by clicking here and hitting Apply Changes, and Studio would automatically download and install the appropriate plugins. This allows Studio to have a much smaller footprint and to load and run much, much faster. One of the things that's new too is we've integrated it into Git and GitHub. So what I'm going to do today is create a project from GitHub. So I'm going to just click here on Create Project from GitHub. I'm going to call it Keynote. I'm going to tell it I want to use the GitHub user ZenCon. Ask it to see what repositories out there. There's a repository called Hello Tweet. I hit Next. Now I'm faced with the choice, do I want to use deployment? Do I want to disable it? In other words, I'm not going to use deployment, I'm just going to develop the application. Do I want to deploy it to some local web root, so some local server, or do I want to use Zend Application Deployment? I'm going to select Zend Application Deployment. This is the new deployment feature in Zend Server 5.5, and it's also integrated into the Developer Cloud. So I can pick Zend Server or the local Zend Server, but I'm going to pick Zend Developer Cloud. So in the Zend Developer Cloud, I'm going to give it my Zend Cloud credentials. I'm going to give it the private key that was used when I created my Zend account initially. I'm going to test the connection to make sure that it works, and hopefully I've typed everything correctly. It did. Nope, didn't work. I must have had a typo. Let me try one more time. And test the connection one more time. Well, that time I was able to successfully type. Okay, now I've got my two containers here from the Dev Cloud. I can decide which one I want to deploy this application I'm building into. I'm going to actually deploy it into this demo, and I'm going to hit Finish. So now it's going to go out to GitHub. It's going to import the project from GitHub. It's going to configure everything, and now I've got an application ready to go. What you see here first is the deployment information for the Zend deployment feature, and this is going to be used during the deployment into DevCloud, and it can also be used to deploy things into other Zend servers running in the cloud in Amazon or Rackspace or even on-premise Zend servers. So for example, I can put in a summary that will be displayed when people go to deploy this application. I can put in a description. Not going to put anything particularly interesting in here. There's a lot of other interesting things that I can do, though. So I can establish dependencies. For example, I can say, gee, I have a dependency on a particular PHP directive that I need to have on. So I can come in here, and we have content assist here, so you hit space. You can see that you can have all of these different pieces of information. And we can basically specify different kinds of stuff like that. I can specify extensions that need to be on. Same kind of thing. So once I specify that, if you try to deploy the application and those directives or extensions are not set, then it will reject the deployment. Again, I can also specify triggers. These are scripts to run during the deployment process. So I can run them before we stage the application, i.e. as we put it onto the server, after we stage it, and before we activate it, i.e. make it live, and then there's the corresponding deactivation sides. Similarly, I can specify what should go into the package. Right now, for example, this is a Zend Framework application, so it's not going to deploy the tests. We don't want the tests on the production server. Again, all of this is being synchronized simultaneously to the XML file, which is the real deployment, so this editor is a nice way to give you access to that. Okay, so now let's deploy this application and see it actually run. So I'm going to click Launch Application over here on the deployment descriptor. It's going to go ahead and launch the application in my container. And there's my application up and running. You can see it's displaying Twitter information from the ZendCon tag. Now, what's this little pop-up that popped up in the corner? Over here I've got something called the phpcloud.com sniffer, and it's saying while I was running this particular page, I detected an error. So if I click on it, I can see the details of that error. And what I see is I had a fatal PHP error. It tells me exactly which URL it was running. It shows me information about the cookie. It shows me information about where in the stack trace the problem happened. So if I look over here, I can see it was this particular PHTML file on line 90. I've even got an ability to pull up the Zend Server code trace. So code tracing in Zend Server is sort of a way of tracking, what exactly went on during the course of the request. Every single method was called, every single parameters to the methods. And if I click on this, it's going to go ahead and launch the code trace. So within this code trace, I can start to diagnose the problem by drilling down through, but in fact, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is actually come over here back to this information, and it tells me exactly where the problem is. So it's on line 90 of this PHTML file. So let me go ahead and go over into that and look at that in Studio. So I'm going to go back into the PHP mode. I'm going to open up my project, and here's the PHTML. And I see, okay, I can't type. It says echo dot. There's no function dot. There's date. So I'm going to hit edit that. Now, what I can do is I can just hit save, and it's going to automatically synchronize with my container over at phpcloud.com. So if I go back to my browser, and I go back to the page back to my container, and I look at it again, and I click on this application, now I can see the application comes up with no error. And I've got my little date on the bottom. So within a few seconds I was able to modify the code, save it, and it automatically synchronized it out to this cloud. Now that's kind of interesting, but what if I want to do something after I get this running? So now that this is running, maybe I want to deploy it over onto Amazon. So for example, here in Amazon, I have CloudFormation, and I've created a configuration with CloudFormation of Zend Server running the Zend Application Fabric. So I've got a Zend Server Cluster Manager, I've got a load balancer set up, all the information that was necessary to create that. But I've already got one of those, so let me go ahead and actually set that up inside Studio. So I'm going to go back into Studio, I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to say, show me the targets. So here are the targets I have from DevCloud, but I can add another one. So let's go ahead and add another one. So I'm going to add a Zend Server target this time for my cluster that's running in Amazon. And this is my Amazon Cluster Manager. And the key is ZendCon. And oh, I guess I'm going to need the secret key from Zend Server in order to do that. So let me go to the Amazon Cluster UI. We log in there. I log into there. I go to the API keys, I find the ZendCon key that I want to use, I grab that key, I come back over to Studio, I paste it in, I hit test connection, it validates that the target's okay, I hit finish, it gives me a new target. So how do I get the application over to this target? Well, I can come over here and I can click on Deploy Application, I can pick the target that's the Amazon Cluster Manager, change the URL slightly so it points to the load balancer URL, and my application's actually already deployed. It was that fast. So if I come over here and I click on this, there's that application we saw earlier running in Amazon. And again, this doesn't only work with Amazon, it works with a lot of things. So if I come in here and I click on Zend Server again, this time I'm going to do something with right scale and rack space. Again, if we come back over here, I have right scale running. Let me go into right scale here. So here's right scale, and here's my right scale rack space configuration. So I'm going to go into it. So what I've got in here is a load balancer, a Zend Server Cluster Manager with a database on it, and an array of 3 Zend servers. Now this is an interesting configuration, and it was done as a proof of concept. It's actually half running in Amazon and half running in Rackspace. The load balancer is in Amazon, the Zend Server Manager and the Zend servers are in Rackspace. So I'm going to go back to here, and I need the key again for the deployment. So let me go ahead and go to my desktop because I've saved all the keys that I'm going to need out here to a key file. And let me go back to Studio. Let me put that key in. We test the connection, hit finish, and again, same thing, same process. Simple, super easy. I just tell it I want this in right scale. I hit finish, and within a few seconds my application is deployed. I say, okay, let me see that thing in rack space. And I click on it, and there's my application running in rack space. Now, this is really cool. I mean, I can do this kind of deployment from Zend Studio. I can basically build my application in DevCloud. If you're not using Zend Studio, what do? The APIs that it's using are basically command line APIs and Java APIs that allow you to do things from the command line as well. So almost any IDE can integrate into this. I can come down here and I can open a simple command window, and I can cd into, and from here I can say Zend. And these are all the commands that can be done from the Zend command line version of the deployment capabilities. So I can create new projects, I can update projects, I can clone them from a Git repository, I can list all the targets. So let me do that real quick. Zend list targets. And you can see here's the targets that's already created, my 2 DevCloud targets, my Amazon Cluster Manager, or my Rackspace Cluster Manager. I can do things like create a new target. So I'm going to say Zend add target -h. So where is the target? http://IBM Smart Cloud. So this is an instance I have in the IBM Smart Cloud. -p tells me where to get the parameters like the key, and I'm going to say c/Zend/IBM INI. So it created that target, it gave it the ID number 4, so all I need to do to deploy the application to that is say Zend deploy application -t4. And of course I can't type, which is one of my biggest problems. And there my application's deployed again. So if I go back to my browser and I basically pick the IBM Smart Cloud, There's the application running the IBM Smart Cloud. And I could have done the same thing with RightScale on Amazon. I could have done the same thing with, there's a cartridge for Red Hat OpenShift and some others that are out there, and you could have done it with your own on-premise Zend servers.